So I'm Riaz Karamali, and I've got a couple of guys who you definitely want to hear from today. And to my immediate left is Ibrahim Alhusseni of FullCycle Energy, and to his left is Bessonov of BitClave. And we're talking about ICO or not ICO, and for the early, for an early stage company. So I think I'm going to take a little bit of time to introduce myself, let each of them introduce themselves so you get a sense of our backgrounds and what brought us to where we are and what we're doing, and then we'll launch into sort of the quandary that might be faced by a lot of early stage companies right now in this particular moment in time. So I've been a lawyer in Silicon Valley for the last 25 years, working with emerging companies and with investors in those companies, done hundreds of millions of dollars of seed and venture finance, and then tech M&A, and I'm also become an investor in many of these companies. I invest through Keiretsu Forum, and largely and independently as well. And in the last few years, we've been working with a lot of blockchain companies, and we're helping companies now figure out how to be compliant with the U.S. Securities Laws and participate in the whole ICO process and in raising money, both through traditional venture methods, but also through token methods. So that's what I do. But I want you to hear from the two gentlemen I'm here with. So let me start with Alex over on the other end, and then we'll move to Ibrahim. So Alex, can you just tell us a little bit about your path and what took you to BitClave and how you made the decision ultimately to do an ICO with BitClave?
Right. So my name is Bessonov, CEO and founder of BitClave. I started BitClave about 2 years ago in 2016. I work in technology most of my life, and I'm a software engineer by education. I have 2 degrees in computer science. Was working a lot in the area of security. My last position before BitClave, I was a chief security officer at LG Electronics, with a focus on the privacy of devices that LG produces and on security of our users. I was always fascinated with this privacy concept of what's going on with our data, and so I was looking for different ways to protect the data and to control the ownership. So when I was starting BitClave, I was looking for different use cases where user can control their own data and decide how and when this data is used. And so as I said, we started a couple of years ago, and back then it was somewhat unspoken problem because people didn't really pay attention to what Google and Facebook and others are doing. But in the last year, and especially last few months, even few weeks, this problem became really big. Mark Zuckerberg just testified in front of Congress about their situations, and what we are doing really attacks this problem heads on, and we are solving this problem. So for me, I was looking for different ways to get there, and I started with distributed computing. I was looking at ways to store users' data outside of a regular model where you store it on data center, and the ownership belongs to essentially one company that owns the data center. So I was looking for ways to use what's called fog computing and other methods to store the data on the edge of the computation. And while doing that, I started to look more closely to blockchain, of which I was aware for a long time, but didn't really think of using blockchain to solve these problems. And so it became quite apparent that blockchain, while it's still not there, is getting closer to be able to help us to solve this problem. And so we started to look at the blockchain, and then the whole crowdfunding thing kind of was booming at the time, and we looked into that. We realized that we can build a very nice use case out of what we do, and we decided to go the route of crowdfunding.
Great, thank you. And I'll come back and ask you some more questions about that in a minute, but let's talk to Ibrahim.
Okay, thanks, Riaz. I moved to the US from the Middle East in 1991 and became an entrepreneur and was very fortunate and made a little bit of money and started to do general tech investing early on and then narrowed it to clean tech investing in the mid-2000s. And I've been, now I run my family office, but I also run a fund called FullCycle Energy. And FullCycle Energy is a dedicated vehicle to a technology I stumbled upon that converts garbage into electricity. The CEO is actually here. The company is called Sonova Power. It's a technology that was developed at the Energy Center of the Netherlands and repurposed from the oil and gas industry that helps us solve this massive garbage crisis that we all hear about and read about, and all the plastics in the ocean and landfills being closed and you name it. We started as traditional funds, raise money, deploy them in these projects. They're very high yielding infrastructure, renewable energy projects. And when I first heard of distributed ledger technologies, I liked the concept, I liked the promise, but I didn't like the execution. It felt like a money grab, and there was a lot of things about it that I didn't appreciate, and so I stayed away from it. But I noticed that the industry was starting to mature a little bit and started to deliver the potentiality of the promise that it initially started to became famous from. So we are now embarking on creating what's called an STO, a security token offering. And the idea and the reason why I chose to do this is for several reasons. Number one, if we can allow any investor who is qualified, in the jurisdiction that they're in, to invest in a private equity asset and have it be liquid a lot faster than the traditional hold period of private equity, that would be advantageous to everybody. I don't know. I'll keep this short. We can get into the details later. Another reason is because, as we all know, there's a growing wealth divide in the world. That if we can open up, low risk, high yielding investment assets, and of course I say, low risk based on my interpretation as an individual and a professional, the low risk, high yielding assets to all classes of investors, hopefully we can narrow the wealth divide a little bit, because that's becoming a massive social problem. So that's why I got into the space.
Thanks, Ibrahim. Alex, your ICO was really enormously successful. I believe you raised $25 million in less than a minute, is it?
Right.
So how do you do that?
Well, there is a lot of things that we did working on the project, and obviously we were successful. There is a timing issue that is always there, so we cannot just take all the credit for ourselves. We work hard. We build a network of people that liked us. We built a pretty big community and used social media to communicate what we do. I personally participated in many conferences and was really looking into meeting a lot of people. Our technology is allowing people to essentially monetize their personal data. And so what we build could potentially affect every single person on Earth. So I think we got a lot of really good traction. I think, again, we were pre-Facebook. It was back in November, so Facebook was not big in the news, but there was Uber leaks, there was Equifax. So a lot of people were thinking about this issue, and so a lot of people kind of looked at what we built, and how we position ourselves as a company that wants to disrupt big players like Google, and they like the idea. So I think it's a lot of kind of background work, but yeah, overall the whole token sale event was very quick, and we got a lot of people kind of joining in within a few seconds.
So there's a lot of groundwork that you had to do, just like any crowdfunding campaign or someone would do on Kickstarter or something like that. Did you also talk to VCs? Did you actively consider taking more traditional kind of VC investment?
So when we started, we talked to VCs. I have a lot of VC friends. I was making this route in the valley and looking into different ways to raise money. We had some, personal investments that we put in, so we were not desperate by any means. We were really looking for high quality investors. In our opinion, what differentiates kind of us and what's coming after is the new ways of not just raising money but selling these utility tokens. And we truly believe that this is the future. So for my VC friends that I talk to, a lot of them are still on the fence, but a lot of them are seriously looking into this. And so we feel that this is a new wave of kind of participation in big projects. We have over 130 countries that participated. So we feel that this is probably better ways than raising money through VCs, because you give more opportunity to people to participate in what they believe in.
Thank you. So Ibrahim, I mean, you've raised hundreds of millions of dollars from investors the old-fashioned way. So and now we've been talking about all the regulatory issues that ICOs are. It's because they're so new and the regulators are looking at it and things are developing. There's a lot of there's a lot of fuzz still out there. There's a lot of uncertainty, and it's not going to be a panacea by any means to do a security token offering. So why are you doing a security token offering when you would be able to raise money the old-fashioned way as well?
Well, like I said earlier, if there's a being fortunate to have come, I'm a refugee. I grew up with limited means. I built myself up. I was fortunate to come to America and have the opportunities that this country provides. And if there's a technology that allows participation by let's say the underprivileged in the world in something that I deem to be a fair risk-reward ratio, then I think at least I should try. And so far I'm fortunate enough that I think the waste to value industry is something that has caught the world's attention rapidly, especially because of the amount of plastics in the ocean and what a concern that is. So I think we have an audience that's interested in this offering. So we deem it a responsibility to attempt to try. If we fail, then we can always go back and do what's always worked. But at least we should try.
I like that.
Yeah.
So Alex, are you talking to? I mean, you must be advising other entrepreneurs, other founders. Are there circumstances where you advise people not to do an ICO?
Well, it's a tough area. It's not for everybody. Obviously, I don't think I don't advise that many companies to be fair. I talk to a lot of people that come to me and ask me questions, and this is usually a very quick conversation. And in these conversations, I see a lot of people coming into this area without clear understanding of what they're doing and why they're doing. They are coming for a quick buck, and I don't think I would advise them to go the ICO route. I think I like the current tendency of relatively big companies and big companies starting to look into ICO area, and I think they definitely are qualified to do that. My general advice, if you think about it, you should first of all decide, are you utility or you're a security, especially if you are going to offer in the United States. If you are offering outside of the United States, there are different jurisdictions. and different classifications. But when you decided you have to, let's say United States, make a clear definition for yourself, talk to your legal counsel, see if that what you do really makes sense, see how far are you, and then you can decide. So it's never a binary answer in this case.
Okay, great. Well, I want to respond to a couple of things you said, but let me also ask the audience. We want to make this interactive, so I will in just a minute start taking questions. If folks want to go to the microphones, we can start, having more of an interactive dialogue. So please feel free to do that. I do want to respond to one thing that Alex said, which was the distinction between security and utility tokens. So this is a distinction that the SEC has really made very clear that they do not recognize. They think that even if a token has utility, and it may well have utility, if it's going to be issued for cash in a typical ICO process, the SEC is taking the position that it's almost always going to be a security token. So our advice as attorneys is you need to assume that it's going to be treated like it's security unless we actually have dialogue with the SEC and are able to convince the SEC in the dialogue, and they are open to dialogue these days. So if we're able to convince them that it's not, then it might be okay to assume that it's not. But other than that, we've got to assume that it's going to be a security for U.S. purposes anyway, and comply with all the securities laws. And there are clear paths to doing that. I'm not going to go into that in detail right now, but there are clear paths to doing that. And then if you want to do something offshore and exclude the U.S., maybe you can do that, but you have to be really careful that those tokens don't flow back into the U.S. very quickly. So there are a lot of issues with that as well. So generally, my advice is comply with the securities laws. We've got. You guys have anything to add right now?
I would just say comply with laws, not just security laws, but
right.
Securities laws is important.
Right. So we've got a couple of questions. We can start taking them.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So for Ibrahim, you were saying that you'd like to have this kind of wealth building capability, if I might paraphrase, available to those who are underprivileged. But specifically as regards having to have accredited investors who by definition are more affluent, I would wonder about how those two things link up. That's part one. Part two is with the attention that the SEC is giving, such as you mentioned, other than jurisdictions outside the U.S. to treat something as other than a security, is there any other way to do an ICO in the U.S., I'm pushing it, and avoid going to jail?
So I'll show you. I think the first question is for Ibrahim, and the second one I can field. So go ahead.
Yeah. So there are vehicles to be able to raise money in the United States for people who are not accredited investors. That is not the first launch that we're doing. We're doing something called a Reg D offering in the United States for accredited investors, and a Regulation S offering overseas for anybody who is or is not an accredited investor. And we're going to put a limit on how much each individual investor can participate. This way, not like one whale from Tokyo can take the entire offering. And this is the way we're going to try to democratize it in the future. What we finance is power plants that have a special risk return profile, and we'll be able to do those, especially when we come to America, under a Reg A plus offering for non-accredited investors in the US, but we'd like to first walk before we sprint.
Yeah, and so on the question about the securities laws, there are compliant paths in the U.S. Reg A plus, which Ibrahim mentioned, is one. Reg CF is one that a lot of people aren't interested in using because it's a crowdfunding exemption for raising less than $1 million, but it could be used for essentially airdrops, right? So if you did, for example, your main accredited investor offering under Reg D, and then you wanted to basically get a lot of tokens out to a lot of folks who are on your mailing list or whatever, you could do that under Reg CF with an airdrop. You could follow the KYC protocol, and you could get tokens, small amounts of tokens, into hands of a lot of people. So that's another method that we're looking at. So there are creative ways to work around these things and make sure you comply with the laws. And there are other techniques that we're talking to the SEC about. So the SEC ultimately wants to support this, and the current administration certainly wants to support capital formation. They want to support growth. What they don't want is fraud. They don't want scams. So if you're someone who's willing to go talk to the SEC, explain what you're doing, make sure that they're on board, I think they're very open to it. Yeah.
Hi.
So yeah, another question.
So let's assume I got a legal opinion that I have a utility token, which passes the Howey test and all of that, and I'm an early stage company wanting to raise capital, then how would you suggest the equity side of it, which is kind of go down the securities token route or dual token structure or kind of a safety kind of model? I mean, given the regulatory uncertainty around the securities token itself, what's an entrepreneur's option early on?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think a legal opinion, unless it's in the last couple of weeks, is worth very much because the law.
This was 3 days back, but yeah.
Okay, well that's pretty good. So that's pretty good. So if and if it's based on actual discussions with the SEC, then maybe there's a path to treating it as a utility token. I mean, obviously one would have to look at the details, but certainly folks would prefer to have a utility token if they could. It's just the SEC has told us that almost all situations are not going to be utility tokens.
Right, but my question was on the equity side, what are the options? So let's assume you don't want speculative pressure on the utility token, so you give it to customers. But if you are fundraising, then kind of what are some options for entrepreneurs?
Okay.
Do you go to a private sale on a security token, or do you kind of just do a kind of...
I see. Yeah, I mean, you could have a private sale. You could have a holding period. I mean, typically with Reg D, it's a 1-year holding period anyway. So that's not going to put, you won't have people who want to flip. They'll be buying because they'll be holding it for a year, right? So that's a way to do it under Reg D with the private sale. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Great.
Bert Vank, Finira Corporation, and I love that I see some hardware and power investment, and usually those deals are well north of $10 million. So it's really intriguing to see the coin offering as an alternative, but of course being in a conservative industry in power, does it make sense? Do I bar myself from later on raising maybe a $50, $100 million round when I start with this? Are they compatible? Or what are the risks in the overall raise strategy long term, going between coins and traditional VCs?
Yeah. So I mean, we're definitely seeing companies that are issuing notes that are keeping open the option to go either way. So we're seeing notes and safes that could go either into a venture round or into a token offering, and they'll convert into either one. Sometimes it's at the option of the investor. Sometimes it's whichever one happens first. So there's a lot of creativity right now going on in the space, and it depends what your needs are. There are things that venture capitalists bring to the table, right? If you're having an enterprise company and you're selling to big banks, you're selling to insurance companies, etc., it's nice to have a marquee venture backer because they can help you open doors, and they also give comfort to the C-level at these big companies. So there are reasons where you might want to have venture backing.
Sure, smart money is always better money. I appreciate your insight and assurance. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Dhaval. I had a question for each of you. In the classic hype cycle, right? Where do you think, which phase is this whole phenomena in? Each of you, I want to know, even the entrepreneurs.
Sorry, what do you mean by the hype cycle?
The classic hype cycle, like there's a phase where there's a big hype, then there's a trough of disillusionment, and then there's maturity, and then the productivity.
Okay.
The Gartner hype cycle.
Alex, what do you want to start?
Sure. Well, we know that Bitcoin is going through, 8 years now approximately. So we've seen different cycles, and we see more adoption in the mainstream media and more discussions, and as a result the price kind of went up quite a lot and dropped, but we see this fluctuation. In terms of the technology development, Bitcoin didn't change that much. It's evolving. The blockchain itself, I personally think it's a very beginning. It's a very beginning or it's a very end, because technology is not scalable yet. The technology is not ready for the prime time, and yet there is a lot of hype. So I look at the blockchain, and it's not just me. A lot of people talk about the blockchain being potentially next internet, where things are going to be developed really fast. And so it's not, if this technology survives, it's a very beginning. So that's my, the way I see it.
Ibrahim?
So I lived through the internet boom and bust, and I remember there was a lot of, the promise of the internet lives on. A lot of companies came and went, and we all saw invested in technologies that were built upon, that forked us right, left, and here we are. So I don't think that decentralized ledger technologies are going away. We may, Bitcoin might be Netscape. The blockchain itself might be pets.com. So it's, maybe, it's too slow, it uses too much energy. I mean, there's all kinds of problems all over the space. But as an idea that's time has come, I think it's now captured the imagination of too many people and too many companies, and the developers of the world are all developing, just all these fantastic ideas of where to take it. So, I think the hype was, there's a lot of people who just wanted to capitalize on something they didn't fully understand, and they were paying premiums for things they didn't understand, and there was a lot of very bad marketing and very deceptive marketing, and a lot of people took advantage of millions of people, and I don't think they realize how much they've been taken advantage of, but I'm glad that's now hopefully slowly getting behind us.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm very enthusiastic on the blockchain, and it's super early days. On the other hand, stuff like ICOs, I think we had, it was a little bit too crazy in the last year or two, and that's going to slow down, and you're going to see a lot more legitimate companies doing ICOs, but not the same kinds of companies that we saw in some of them that turned out to be scams, etc. There's going to be a lot less of that, hopefully.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say that at the end of the day, an ICO is a startup. Like, most companies are a startup, and the same rules of success and failure and ratio for any startup is all the same. Whether it's funded via a token offering or not, doesn't, so the speculation is the same no matter what.
Interesting, yeah. Okay, so any more questions? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let me repeat the question. So the question is to Alex, who went through a successful ICO, and how is he managing to sustain that success?
Well, the ICO portion was obviously successful, and it was, I would say, a lot of fun in terms of what you can do. But this is just the beginning for us. So for us, it's all about building continue building on the success. So it's a lot of hard work right now. It's being really very focused on where we want to be in a few years from now, and how our tokens is being used now and how it's going to be used in the future. So I would say, for anybody who goes through this, you start with, it's a lot of hard work. Then there is maybe a couple of days of feeling great and there's a lot of success, and then there is much more hard work.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, I think we're out of time, but thank you very much for coming, and we're going to be around, so we can certainly talk offline too.
Thank you, Riaz.